Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session of What's Next? New Ways of Engaging Jewish Sources. We are really delighted to have you here today with us. Throughout this series, we've had talented JTS faculty and staff highlighting ways in which they're using our textual tradition. And my colleague Tanya is going to post the entire series lineup in the chat. You can find recordings of all the previous sessions on our website. And I want to give, before we jump into this week, I want to give a quick preview on our next 2 weeks. Know that we're going to keep an eye out for an announcement because next week's session is about the new JTS MFA program. This program will launch this week. And while I cannot announce who the director is today, I will be able to send an email out later this week. So keep an eye out for it. You will be excited. They will be in conversation with the director of the Center for Lifelong Learning, Lisa Springer, and it will be a very exciting session. And we also have added an additional session to this series on March 21st. Rabbi Jan Urbach is going to be speaking about a text that she's put together for our Passover reader. So both of those things will come out this week and you'll get to see them. So please mark your calendar. And we're giving you one bonus Passover episode for engaging new sources. Now I want to switch gears and we're going to talk about Biblical Hebrew. In the last few years, we've launched a Certificate in Biblical Hebrew program. And this has provided people with all different levels of learning with opportunities to really engage with text from the very beginning. And actually, we're even taking it back. I think starting in the summer, we're going to have a fundamentals class for those people who are like, always wanted to learn how to read the Torah. This will be like that starting point. But we've had all of these classes going. And I'm really excited that Dr. David Moster could join us today to talk about not just text, but kind of one of his passions in text. And that has a great fun story that goes along with it as well. Thank you to everyone who's donated to support this series. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor of the series, please check out the website for that. There are 3 levels that you can do, Hahab, Sadiq, and Navi. And more information will be posted in the chat. We're really excited about all of the people who have supported us, and know that you have 2 more sessions potentially if you want to sponsor. Today, we are going to be focusing on from online auction to JTS special collections and how 2 historic Bibles were reunited in the JTS Library. This is a story that started last summer as Rabbi Dr. David Moster was about to celebrate his 40th birthday. He celebrated his 40th birthday like all of us by looking at rare texts and manuscripts, and we're going to get a bit of a sense of why this is a passion for him, and then also what you can find by exploring these particular texts. Dr. David Moster has taught Biblical Hebrew in person and online for over a decade. He just said he was teaching on Zoom well before the pandemic. He was doing this online learning thing when it was in its infancy. And he is the director of our Certificate in Biblical Hebrew program. He holds 3 master's degrees, a doctoral degree, and a rabbinic ordination. And he directs the Institute of Biblical Culture, where he teaches Hebrew and creates video materials about ancient Israelite language and culture for the general public. And we're going to share the link to his YouTube channel, because if you like Dr. Moster's teaching, this would be a great way to get more of it. I also just want to know, just quick, if you guys could raise your hand in the chat. How many people have been active in our Biblical Hebrew program who are here today? So if you guys just want to raise your hand just so we can get a quick sense of, I'm getting all these numbers. This is fun. The number is at least 9. We're up to 11. And a thumbs up too. I love it. So we have some participants before. Know that we would love for you guys to get involved with Biblical Hebrew. We'll post some information about the program, and classes are starting. We actually are enrolling our next set of classes for the summer. So something to think about as you're moving forward. And I'm so excited for all of you to join us. And David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ellie. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So as Ellie said, this past summer, I turned 40 years old, And my in-laws decided that they wanted to get me something, but they didn't know what. So they wrote me a check and said, David, you have to get something you like. And that summer, my basement flooded, and I remember telling my wife, "Oh, let's just use it for the basement. This is the best thing." And she said, "No, the whole point is you need to get something that you would really like as a gift." And I said, "Okay, I hear you. That means that the one thing on earth that I really would like is a book from the 1800s known as The Masorah by Christian David Ginsburg." And here it is. It's a 4-volume work, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I wanted this because I would actually be using it. It wouldn't just be something that I would put on or think about selling. For me, it would actually be using it. I would use it maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And even though I have the PDF for all 2,500 pages, it's much better to actually use this book because it's not a typical kind of book. It's a little tricky. So this is what I wanted, and I was very excited. But before we even get to what happened next, what I need to do is just step back and say, what is the Masorah? What is this book about, this Masorah? What does that mean? And in order to understand what the Masorah is, we need to travel back to a time before the printing press. And essentially what it means is, Masorah literally means the tradition or something passed down, but it means the notes of the scribes. And here we see a scribe in Jerusalem in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and these scribes would actually hand down notes back many centuries ago. And these notes were meant to avoid problems and inconsistencies. Basically, they were trying to avoid this. This is the first word of Genesis 9:29. And at the top is taken from the synagogue that I belong to. It says Vayhi, and it was 4 letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's in the singular. And here we see a Yemenite Torah that says Vayiyu, and they were 5 letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the problem that the scribes are trying to avoid. They don't want different Torah scrolls having different words. The whole point of having Torah scrolls is that everyone can point to them and say, this is what's inside the text. So the scribes don't want this to happen. Not only don't they want this to happen, they also want to tell you who's right in situations like this. And in this case, this came from an Ashkenazi's Torah scroll. This came from a Yemenite. And in this case, in all likelihood, the Yemenites actually have the better reading, the better text, the more correct, according to the scribes. Okay, so let's now jump back to the year 1008 and actually look where one would find the Masorah. Where are these scribal notes that I'm talking about? How can you find them? And we're looking at a page in the Leningrad Codex. I picked a page from the book of Esther, which we just read a couple of days ago. And over here, we can see this is the 2nd chapter of the book of Esther. And in beautiful 3-column form, 1, 2, 3, everything's here. But the thing is, this is more than just the book of Esther. This is the book of Esther with the Masorah, with that tradition, the scribal notes. So if I were to black out the biblical text, you could actually see, if you kind of squint a little, you'll see there's actually a lot of writing here at the top. There's a lot of writing here at the bottom. And there's even shorthand notes in the margins. A lot of these are just 1 letter long, like that, just 1 letter. So all of this material is the Masorah. These are the scribal notes, and the notes are trying to tell scribes, write it this way, don't write it that way. You think this looks odd? No, just keep it. It's the way it should be. You think this doesn't make sense? Nope. We thought of it. We like it. Keep it. That's the whole goal of these notes. So here we have Christian David Ginsburg. They gave him an office in the British Museum, and here he is going through 60 Tanakh manuscripts. And these 60 manuscripts, I can't zoom in for sure and tell that these are handwritten on parchment codices, but in all likelihood, that's what these open books all are. And what he's doing is he's going through these 60 manuscripts, and he's essentially making an encyclopedia of sorts, or like a dictionary, so that you don't have to go to the manuscripts to find the scribal notes. You can go to his book and you'll find the scribal notes. And that's what he was trying to do. Let's take a look at one example. There are 13,000 of these. So this is 1 out of 13,000. I picked this one because it's straight out of the book of Esther. Very timely. So we're on the Yud page. in essentially our encyclopedia. We're on the Yud. So here we have Yud. And we see the words Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, hey, 5 times. The word Jerusalem appears 5 times, and these are the lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these are the verses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, anybody here who's opened the Tanakh knows that that's preposterous. The word Jerusalem appears 350 plus times. It's all over the place. Once you're out of the Torah, it's everywhere. So what's going on? How can the scribes say that Jerusalem appears 5 times instead of 354, for example? And so what they're telling you is that even though we today spell Jerusalem with a yud, if you go to Jerusalem or you look on Waze or Google Maps, it's spelled with a yud. Even though we spell it that way, in the Tanakh, it's actually spelled without the yud. And it's really pronounced as if that yud is there, but it's not. And these are the 5 cases in the entire Tanakh where there is a yud. So if you're a scribe in the book of Esther and you see a yud and you say, that's clearly a mistake, let me change it, do not change it. This is correct in these 5 cases. And this is what Ginsburg did. You can imagine the amount of time it took to go through 60 manuscripts and pull out 13,000 of these entries. Okay, so this is what I wanted. This is what I was really excited about. And I said, great, I'm going to go get me my Christian David Ginsburg, the Masorah. And I went online and I saw that it was being sold for $7,627.90 on eBay. And this was a real punch in the gut because someone had just told me that I had missed out on an auction where it sold for $600, less than a tenth of the price. So I contacted the seller. I said, hey, what are you talking about? Why is this so high? It just went for 600. And the seller said, and this is important, this book is signed. It's autographed. So you have Ginsburg's autograph on the book, which I admit it's very nice. It's very important. But for me, it didn't matter because my whole goal is to use these books. My goal is not to just get a fancy book. So I made the seller came down a little bit, but I couldn't come up that much. And the reason I didn't come up that much was luckily on another website, abebooks.com, which is great for buying old antique books. I found this. It was being sold by a bookseller in Cleveland, Ohio. And as you can see here, it's really beat up all the way around these edges here. It's even cracking here in the middle. And also, this is actually cloth. See the cloth? If we kind of go back up, this was a nice bound leather. So, to me, it didn't matter. I'm going to use this. I could care less that I got some random, maybe a library had rebound it, but there was no library mark, but it didn't matter to me. But that's what I got. I was really excited. I cashed my check, my birthday check. I added a little bit more of my own, and I finally got this book, and I was really excited. And then I opened the front page, and all the questions started. Right away, on the front page, we open up, and I see the following. Each volume has on it the name of the subscriber and a number, as well as the signature of the author. Copies without these marks will be considered pirated. Okay, so I don't have a name of a subscriber, I don't have a number of copy, and I don't have a signature of the author. I now know why that other book had a signature. They're all signed. It's nothing fancy, right? They're all supposed to be signed, but why is mine not signed? And this was just really odd to me. I had no idea why. And I began wondering, could this have been quote unquote pirated? But for any of us who have ever been in biblical studies, it's not the kind of field where people are pirating and stealing things off the back of a truck. So I don't know exactly what happened here, but it was my first question. The next question that I had was this line right here. So this line looks very similar to, if you can see in the top left corner, this line in the top left, which is printed. But this line right here is pencil. And there were 2 pencil marks, one in each margin of the page. So there's 2 on each page. And there's 2,500 pages. And that means there's 5,000 pencil marks. And I just say to myself, who on earth is spending how many days it takes? Was it 3 days, 4 days? I don't know how long it takes of a life to pencil in by hand 5,000 of these, but somebody did a great effort and tried to put this all together. So this was the next thing, these pencil lines. And then finally, in volume 2, here we see the pencil line. In volume 2, I started seeing numbers written across this pencil line. So here we see 151, 277. And at first I was like, okay, I've bought old books before where somebody had written notes in them. I've written notes in my own books. It's from time to time. But at this point, I'm just thinking, okay, someone's writing a note here or there. But then it just dawned on me. We're looking at one page here that has 18 notes. And so if we're talking 18 notes times 700 pages, we're talking thousands and thousands of numbered notes. And at this point, I am just wondering what is going on? What are these notes? What is this book that I bought? What is happening? The book is supposed to be teaching me things, but I'm actually learning. I'm more curious about these notes than the book at this point. So I didn't really know what was going on, but I was very excited. This is the start of a journey, and I was very excited to go down this road, see where this book would lead me. So the first clue to figuring out these notes has to do with that page we saw in the Leningrad Codex, written in the year 1008. So this scribe did not write at the top of the page what book he is in. It doesn't say Esther up here. You have to know you're in the book of Esther. And there's no page number down at the bottom. So there's none of that. So what is going on here is that we don't have a book number. We don't have a page number. We don't even have chapter numbers or verse numbers. So later hands would fill in what's known as a folio number. And let's take a look. So this might be the prettiest writing I've ever seen, this little script here. So here we see 433. What this means is that this is folio 433. And this side of the page, this parchment, is going to be 433A. And the back side is going to be 433B. When the printing press came around and page numbers developed, this would eventually not be called 433A. If we were to write a book today, we would just double it and say this is 866, and the backside is 867. But this is what we have here. We have a page system called folios, where we have A's and B, A and B. And now I understand what these notes are. We've got 151A, 237B, 277A, 370B. What we have here is essentially somebody looking at manuscripts. So there's some manuscript out there that if you look at folio 277 side A, you're going to find Isaiah 60:13. And if you look for 237B, you're going to find Kohelet 3:16. Okay, so this was the first kind of crack in the shell of these notes, that we're dealing with manuscripts. And I began to wonder who would, first of all, have manuscripts, and not only that, who would take the time to put them in line with Ginsburg. And I immediately thought of Seligman Bayer. Seligman Bayer was essentially doing a very similar work to Christian David Ginsburg, but in Germany. And Bayer was planning to put out a new Masoretic Tanakh, and Ginsburg was planning to put out a new Masoretic Tanakh. And whenever that happens, when two people are so close, perhaps, I'm not sure if it's inevitable, but it often happens, is they start to hate each other. And Ginsburg and Bayer, really, sometimes I would read Ginsburg and I'd wonder, is he more interested in presenting his ideas or disproving Bayer's? And so it really felt like there was some kind of tension between these two scholars. And I thought, hey, this could be Bayer. Bayer might be taking a look at his manuscripts in Germany. He had a great deal of manuscripts, and seeing if Ginsburg is right and checking, what does it say here? What does it say there? Back and forth. And I thought that Bayer would actually be the one who made these notes. But the problem were those pencil marks. The pencil marks were continued into volume 4 of my copy. And volume 4 was published after Bayer died. So it couldn't have been Bayer to make those marks, because Bayer didn't live that long. And so this was gone, but we'll return to him later. I just want to say it was interesting. Literally last night, as I was preparing this talk, I realized that the great irony that I instinctively, on my own library shelf, put the books of Christian David Ginsburg right next to Bayer, because they were so similar. And so even though they're so similar and they didn't like each other, really the two of them are two peas in a pod when it comes to studying the scribal notes of the Masorah. Okay, so at this point, I'm thinking, okay, it's not Bayer. Who else had manuscripts? Who else would have cared? Could it have been Ginsburg? Did I buy Ginsburg's own copy of Ginsburg? Is this possible? Is this what's happening here? And luckily, at the Trinity College Library in Cambridge, Ginsburg had donated not only his books, not only his Tanakh manuscripts, he even donated a lot of his handwritten essays and books. And a friend of mine had actually contacted them in the last few years and had asked them, could you please put this online? And they put one of these online known as the Chaf manuscript. And here is just one page. And you can see all the numbers going all the way down. So there's going to be numbers everywhere. That's going to be really helpful for me to try and put the numbers together. But also, what's really helpful here was that every once in a while, I would have book mentioned in my copy. Like, so, for example, you see over here, this Gen for Genesis. Like, I had never seen a G like that in my life. Maybe you have. I'd never seen that. And so that to me was really unique. I wanted to see what that would turn out. The N here has a really cute curl on the left. Really nice, almost like a golf club. And then over here we have the D's have this really big overhang. So these for me were just as important as the numbers themselves. And so here, let's just take a look at a couple of numbers. This is Cambridge 163A, and this is my copy. Here's the 79 in Cambridge, and here's the 79 in my number 179. Both 7 and 9 just get blown up really big. So that was interesting. And then for me, but at this point, I was very intrigued, but I was not convinced. For me, it was when I saw that G, the G of Genesis, and the G in my copy. It's just remarkable. Here's that N with that like golf club at the bottom, and here we have that N right there. And again, we have the D with the overhang, the D with the overhang. So at this point, I am really excited. This book that I bought, the one that was the inexpensive one, so to speak, the one that was disregarded, was actually Christian David Ginsburg's private copy. And now this made a lot of sense. So I don't have the name of subscriber. It's not for a subscriber. There's no number and there's no signature. You don't sign your own copy. This book was his own book. And so this was the first of what will actually be a number of, whether we call it a bracha, brachot, blessings, or good luck or good fortune, whatever we want to view this here, this was the first of a number in this story. So I had actually unwittingly bought Ginsburg's book. Okay, so now at this point, I need to figure out what these notes are. And I know that we're dealing with manuscripts, so I know that all of these numbers here are manuscripts. But the next number, the next thing to figure out was these colors. So on the outside of the purple, of the pencil line, we have purple notes. And on the inside of the pencil line, we have black and red notes. And I was later able to determine that the black and red are actually one manuscript, not two. So we have the black and red and the purple. So essentially what this means is I can tell just by looking at this page and this pencil line that Ginsburg is using two manuscripts that he didn't use in his book beforehand. And it's my job now, the way I see it, to track down the first manuscript, which is going to be the purple note manuscript.
I know we were gonna take some questions right here. Are you ready for it?
Sure.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind minimizing your screen, that would be great.
Okay.
I think, first of all, I'm already, as a person who loves rare book stories. This is unbelievable. I'm amazed by this ability to like the handwriting, all this stuff. It's great. But I think, could you give us a little bit more insight into who Christian David Ginsburg is? You know, he was in Britain. He was working through the British Museum. How did he get this commission? Where was his, why did he have the background to do this? You know,
Yeah, Christian David Ginsburg was born David Ginsburg in Warsaw, and he was in the rabbinical school, and he was very interested in more scholarly topics than the regular rabbinical school. And he actually got involved with a bunch of Christian missionaries in from England who went to Poland. And what happened is at first he was fighting them and fighting them, and then later, from everything we can tell, he became a great advocate for Christian missionizing in Poland. And so he converted. His mother was from England, and so he had a step of 1 foot in the door. And when he went to England, he actually married. His first wife died, but he married 2 times, and both families he married into essentially made him a gentleman so that he was able to do research without having a job. And so he was doing research in England. And it's even though he had converted to Christianity, and even though he did do some of his work was related to the New Testament, there was some of it. The vast majority was bringing the wealth of Hebrew sources to the English public, and that was his main goal.
and when you talk about the Masorah as like this concept, when was this the first kind of definitive published copy? Previous to that, you needed manuscripts, or how does that fit into like how would you? And is this too? Are we getting too complicated because there are so many different iterations here?
No, I mean just think of like, remember we all had those Encyclopedia Britannicas, right? And who was the first, right? So somebody was the first person to say, "I'll make an encyclopedia," whichever one it was. If it was Britannica, if it was another company. So Ginsburg was the first, and since then he's been the best. So that's why it's rare for a book to be used 140 years later. That's not usual. But in the field of biblical studies, it's not unheard of. Some dictionaries last a long time, and this is actually one of them that lasts a great deal of time. Yeah.
We have many comments coming in, but we'll save a lot of these for later. We have someone who's pointing out that they're from South Africa, and the G that you were pointing to is similar to the one that he learned in the British Commonwealth as a G.
Good.
And
Another source. Good.
so you've got that. And then another person has pointed out that if you want your own copy of Ginsburg and you're not ready to go through all the work of rare books and collections, that you can get there's a 2018 reprint of a CD of the a reprint of the book. So they are available in less auspicious forms. But I think let's go back to your presentation and get through, and I'm sure we'll have more of these questions around provenance and all of these other pieces going forward, and I'll save those for the end.
Yeah, and like any book printed, before 100+ years ago, it's available on archive.org for free. So you can definitely download it. Like I said, it's 2,500 page PDF, but if you can handle it, then it's definitely worthwhile.
I mean, your printer, it's it's up to you how you want to print what you want to
Right,
print.
right, exactly, to print it. Okay, so now my goal is to find this purple note manuscript. So I know I have Ginsburg's book, but now I have no idea what he's doing and why he's taking these notes. So the next thing, let me just get my laser. Okay. So the next thing I do is I go through the entire book, my copy, and I'm looking for anything unusual. And I do find something unusual in this note. Here we see that on the verse Genesis 40, verse 1, this appears on folio 1A. That means the opening page of this manuscript begins with Genesis 40. In other words, the first 39 chapters of Genesis are missing. Now, this isn't uncommon in manuscripts from 1,000 or 800 plus years ago. You miss things go missing. Like, for example, the most important Tanakh manuscript that we have in our possession today is the Aleppo Codex. And the Aleppo Codex is missing most of the Torah and a bunch of other things. So what happened here is that the first 39 pages fell off, first 39 chapters. And that was something to me was unique, and I could look for that. And I went to Ketiv, which is the International Collection of Digitized Hebrew Manuscripts. It's run by the National Library of Israel, and there are about 100,000 manuscripts that you can look at here. And it's really a phenomenal website. It's very slow to run. It's very clunky. And that's why when I wanted to crack this code by just looking at every single manuscript on earth until I find one that starts with Genesis 40, I was really frustrated. It took a long time. It was very frustrating, and I couldn't find the manuscript on here. I went through hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts. I couldn't find one that fit the bill, and I was just throwing my hands up. It was like trying to crack a safe by not using a drill, but by just trying every combination that's possible. And it just really wasn't working out. So I went back to the notes and I said, well, what would happen if I put the numbers, these are numbers, what would happen if I put them in an Excel spreadsheet? So I started putting these all the numbers in. This is just an example of what the sheet looked like. It was much longer. And then when I would press sort, and it would sort all of these, make all sense of it. I would notice that there would be notes on Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. And there would be notes on the writings as well, Chronicles, Psalms, Eov, Proverbs, Ruth, Song of Songs. It would be all of this. But the prophets were missing. There was not a single note on Joshua, on Isaiah, on the 12 minor, nothing. So essentially what we have here, if you think of the Tanakh, the three-part Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, as a sandwich, what we basically have here is the bread, and nothing in between. And this to me is odd. I've never heard of anything like this. To this day, I still don't know of a second text like this. It is very unusual. Who would write a Torah, skip the prophets, and then write the writings? To me, it was just very odd. And so where could I go to try and find information about something like this? And it dawned on me that Christian David Ginsburg loved this kind of stuff. And in another book of his, not the one that I have, the Masorah, but another book of his in the very back, there's a table of manuscripts described where he tells you what's the ingredients for each Tanakh codex, for each handwritten Tanakh. What are the ingredients? Does it have the Pentateuch? Does it have the prophets? Does it have the hagiographa? Yes or no? And so when you go down here and you look at this, there's only one that has the Torah and the Pentateuch and the writings, the Ketuvim, but does not have the Nevi'im, the prophets. It's that bread sandwich, bread, nothing in the middle. And it's called the Earl of Leicester. It's written here 1250 to 1300, and it's Sephardic from Spanish lands. All right, so who was the Earl of Leicester? The Earl of Leicester's name was Thomas Coke. He wasn't the only Earl. There were Earls before him. There's even an Earl today. And Thomas Coke, the herald, the crest for the Earls of Leicester, because the word coke sounds like digestion in Latin, they picked the ostrich because it is known to digest anything. And they say it can even digest metal, like this horseshoe here. So the Earl of Leicester, this is his crest. And over here, we actually see he lived in a small house in England known as Holcombe Hall. And Holcombe Hall was actually what gave name to the manuscript that Ginsburg was studying. It was cataloged as the second Hebrew manuscript in Holcombe, so it became known as MS Holcombe II, manuscript Holcombe II. And here we see this is the country home of Holcombe Hall. And here we're actually looking at where MS Holcombe II used to live in the library at Holcombe Hall, and you can see people on the tour. I've never been there, but I imagine that These books are all very, very old. I just imagine based on what I know about the library thus far. So this is the name of the manuscript that Ginsburg was calling what I called the Purple Notes manuscript, is manuscript Holcomb 2. With this information, I went back to Ketiv, and I knew I wasn't looking for a Tanakh. That's why I missed it. It's not a Tanakh. It's a Torah and a Ketuvim. I needed to look for a special book that's not your regular Tanakh. And I was able to type in the word Leicester, and immediately, boom. If you look over here in the top left corner, it almost looks like a scratch, but that's number 1. That means we're on folio 1A, and folio 1A begins with Genesis 40. This is exactly it. This is the manuscript. I have found the manuscript. I can confirm that, but I still have a problem, is that this Ketiv scan from, I believe, the 70s or 60s, you can't read any of the Masorah notes, which is the whole point of Ginsburg. Ginsburg isn't as interested in this as he is in this. He's interested in both, but still, this is the main material here. So this was basically useless. And so now, well, I did know also from the Ketiv that there was a new owner. It wasn't the Earls of Leicester. It was actually Martin Schoyen, who actually is one of the world's greatest manuscript collectors, not just Hebrew, of any language. He has manuscripts from all over the world. And the Schoyen Institute actually put up the MS Holcomb 2 this past summer, the same summer I bought the book. So this is the second great coincidence here, that the moment I find the book, all of a sudden, Christie's is putting on its website 14 high-resolution images of the book. So which they called the Holcomb Hebrew Bible, right? MS Holcomb 2. And so here we have a picture of one page on Ketiv. I believe it's page 25, folio 25A. Notice here we have the Parsha marker. And like right down here, we have like this little indent. So this is what it looks like on Ketiv. And this is what it looks like in Christie's, the Parsha marker. You can see the fancy micrography around it. And then over here, we have that little indent, the same page. So this to me was really important to get my hand on these images. And what that meant is I could test to see what Ginsburg was doing. And let's take a look. So in Ginsburg's Masorah, there is a note that says bim'od ma'od, very, very much, vav, 6 times. Now you need to know it's very, very much instead of just writing very much. You know, don't leave out the extra ma'od. Don't do that. It's very important to get this right. This occurs 6 times. These are the 6 verses. One of them is Exodus 1:7. And if we look at Exodus 1:7, we're going to see in the Purple Notes manuscript 10a. So let's see how it works. Let's go to 10a. Here we're at 10a on the top left. We're on folio A of 10. We have our verse in Exodus. We have the word bim'od ma'od. And we have the vav, the 6. So far, so good. And then if we go to the bottom of the page, the manuscript is going to have all 6 occurrences and tell you what these 6 are. So what Ginsburg was essentially doing was going through the manuscript page by page by page and seeing where and how it lined up with this. That's what he's doing. He said, oh, 10a, I found it on Exodus 1:7. All right, so that's what Ginsburg was doing. And at this point, I now know what the Purple Notes manuscript is. I know what Ginsburg was doing. I have a good feeling why he was writing these notes, but I'll save that for the end. So at this point, it's clear to me that a number of really interesting hindsight passages come into light. So let's take a look at this from another book of Ginsburg's, where he says, I take this opportunity of tendering my most cordial thanks to the Right Honorable the Earl of Leicester for the loan of this beautiful codex and for allowing me to keep it more than 2 years, thus enabling me to collate every word, both of the text and the Masorah. So thank you, Earl. You lent it to me for 2.5 years. And what did I do with it? I wrote it into the book that I, David Moster, would buy online just a century later, right? That's what I bought was this paragraph, was he was taking his notes from the manuscript and kind of filtering them into his own encyclopedic system, okay? Then the second thing that came in that made sense in hindsight was there were 3 times in the Codex, in Ginsburg's book, that he wrote Codex Leviticus. And the Codex Leviticus was just my brain's way of making sense of what was actually Codex Leicester, Leicester. So there's no Codex Leviticus that I was looking for. I had no idea. It didn't make any sense. It means the Earl of Leicester's Codex, manuscript Holcombe Hall, #2. And finally, what's really the greatest surprise was when I actually found the book. And here is the book that this is from a Christie's photograph that wasn't on their website. They sent it to me individually. Here, this is the first page, which we saw beginning with Genesis 40, but sewn into the manuscript itself are handwritten notes of Christian David Ginsburg that by now I really recognize. I'm not even sure if I recognize my own handwriting, but I know his handwriting. And so I know this is his handwriting, and he actually even mentions it. He signs his name. And what we have over here is handwritten notes sewn in, and they're perfectly sized to be part of this codex. They are perfectly sized. And so this is the third great coincidence, or hindsight, what I realized, he's not only writing about it, he is part of this story of this codex. All right, now we're getting into another great blessing, and another great coincidence in this story was that right after that summer, when I bought the Ginsburg book, as well as when the MS Holcombe 2 went up for auction at Christie's, I began teaching and running the Biblical Hebrew program at JTS. And I would love to just take one moment here. I think this is a great opportunity to just tell you about our fantastic program. We, at any one time right now, are running 5 different levels of courses. We do have a certificate program, which is 4 courses long, but we are running right now on Zoom different courses for people who want to learn the alphabet, people who know nouns and maybe a little verbs, people who know a little bit more about verbs. Our toughest class are those stems. If you've ever studied Hebrew, those are the toughest. And then we have a reading group at the end where we just read the Tanakh. Right now we're reading the book of Ezra. We're already in chapter 3. We're running through. That's how we do it. We read right through. There's no lecture. We're just we call it the study group, the study circle. So please, if you are interested, you can go to JTS's website. There's a lifelong learning tab at the top. And then in that tab, you'll find Biblical Hebrew. Okay, I would love to see you there. As Ellie had pointed out, a lot of our students are here. I think right now we have 120 students. So if you would love to get on that train, we would love to see you. So welcome.
By the way, David, I hate to interrupt though. One of your students came forward to be like, his Hebrew class is so great, all caps, just so you know that.
Okay, great, excellent. Okay, so why does it matter that I'm at JTS? Why is that a big part of the story? So it all has to do with the world expert that Christie's hired to analyze the Holcombe 2 manuscript. Her name is Professor Judith Oljovi-Schlanger at Oxford. And what she did was she connected the MS Holcombe 2 to a Tanakh, a Torah at JTS. She wrote, I've determined a close affinity between MS Holcombe 2 and MS New York Jewish Theological Seminary, I'll call it L44A, a Pentateuch dated by its colophon to 1241 and written in Toledo. The handwriting of the main text seems to be the work of the same person. So it's the exact same handwriting. The Masorah of MSJTS is written by Master 1 of the Holcombe Hebrew Bible, and those Masorah notes are the same scribe, who's probably identical to the main scribe. In other words, MS Holcombe 2 has a sister codex, and it is sitting just 8 floors beneath my office at JTS. All I have to do is walk through the Great Hall, which is beautiful, and then here is the Hileli, JTS L44A. This is called the Hileli because there used to be an important Tanakh known as the Hileli, and it's lost. So we don't have it, but we have texts that talk about it. So this became dubbed the Hileli. Almost like, let's say, if you know a big fan of, let's say, Jane Austen, you might call them Mr. Darcy or Miss Elizabeth, right? Something like that. Like they're not Mr. Darcy, but they quote it often. So the same thing here. Hilleli, it's not the Hilleli Codex, but it quotes it very often. So it became known as the Hilleli, and it's from the 1200s in Toledo. And from here we can actually see who this scribe was. It says it's hard to tell, but if you can squint here, you can probably make it out as well. Ani Yisrael HaSofer, I, Israel the scribe, Ben Rav Yitzchak Nishmato Eden, the son of Isaac, may his soul be in Eden, Ben Yisrael, Ben, son of Israel, Katavti, I wrote, Elu Chamisha Sifrei Torah, these 5 books of the Torah, the Ezras El Gadol, with the help of the great God. And so we know the scribe's name is Yisrael HaSofer. He lived in Toledo. I got this from Wikipedia. It says it's from the 1500s. It's interesting to me that this is in the 1500s. There's a lot of similarities between the other picture on Wikipedia, which is from today. You can see just the two of them. There's a lot of overlap. So maybe, just maybe, when Yisrael HaSofer was walking around, Toledo would have looked a little bit like this. At this point, I reached out to the Shoyin Institute and I said, hey, I'm really looking for this manuscript. I have these research interests. I'm not just calling out of the blue. Could you please help me locate MS Holcomb 2? And thankfully, they didn't have to, but they did. They pointed me to the director of the new owner, and the new owner was thrilled when I spoke to them. The new owner said, when I called, I said, hi, my name's David Moster. I'm a researcher at JTS. And they said, JTS, I've been wanting to visit JTS for so long. This is so exciting. We have so much to talk about. And I said, great, come to JTS. And the owner said, yes, and I'll bring the book. The book. We don't know what to call the book. We just call it the book. They said, I'll bring the book. And here it is in December. The book was brought to JTS. Let's kind of focus in a little bit on that ostrich with that horseshoe, that beautiful cover, the Earl of Leicester. And what we did was I had prepared, as you see here in these little notes on the left-hand side, I prepared what we're going to look at when we open these 2 Tanakhs together and see what we have. This one is the Torah, the Hilleli at JTS, and this one is much larger in 3 columns instead of 2. It was probably meant to be a more impressive book. This was the Holcomb manuscript number 2. And this is what it looked like doing back and forth, looking one thing to another. Here is Mordechai Schwartz, a professor of Talmud at JTS, as well as the special collections librarian. He is looking at the Hilleli, and we're going back and forth like a volley. What do you have here? What do you have there? What do you have here? What do you have there? What do you have there? And it was really all the same. It was really just same. And then for me, this was like the kicker. Like this was, once we got to here, I was just sold on that identification of Aljovi Schlanger, that this is where the same scribe. So let's take a look at one word here in the Hilleli. This word is tideru. Y'all will vow, or in this case, which y'all vow. Tideru. Everyone, there's a dot in the dalid, which is called a dagesh. So there is a dot here. It's expected. It should be there. A dot in the dalid. And then over here, there's a note which says chazina behileli. I saw in the Hilleli. Tideru Rafe, the word tidru, but no dot in that dalid. And so what this is a remarkable note, because the scribes were, for the most part, anonymous. They'll never write their name in the middle. You're not going to get an I did this or I. The whole point is not I. The whole point is just to pass it on, pass it on. And here he's saying, I saw in the Hilleli. This can't be copied by another scribe, because another scribe would just say Behileli. You can't copy I saw. So literally, Yisrael HaSofer is looking at the Hilleli Codex, which is lost to us today. Here we have in the Holcomb 2 manuscript, Tideru with the dagesh, and then the note, Chazina behileli, I saw in the Hilleli with my own eyes, Tideru without a dagesh. And so this for me was more confirmation to the connection. It's not based on the handwriting. It's not based on the style of script. It's based on the fact that you have the same exact note, which no one else would ever write anywhere. And it's the same script. So this was really exciting that we had found the second of Yisrael HaSofer's books. There is one more at Oxford, so there's actually 3 altogether. And that's part of my next research topic, is looking at that one as well. So as this story gets better and better, the owner of MS Holcomb 2 said, well, you know what? You guys are studying it. Why don't I leave the book here? And they worked out an agreement for a 1-year loan so that it could be studied and digitized. And we had a very exciting day. This is in the basement of the JTS Library. There is a advanced digitization lab with a number of amazing tools. And this was me holding the MS Holcomb 2. And here we go. What we're going to do is digitize it. But before we do that, we need to learn about, in the world of manuscript studies, like for me, I'm not the biggest sports fan, I'm not the biggest music fan, but like I love manuscripts. So Ardom Bar Chama is a manuscript in our little field here. Ardom Bar Chama, here you can see him photographing with the camera pointed down. He's photographing the great Isaiah scroll for Google. So this is the Dead Sea Scrolls. So if you've ever seen an image of that, that's his picture. Here he is with the Pope, because he photographed the Codex Vaticanus, a very important manuscript in Greek. And here he is. I mentioned the Aleppo Codex. He's the one who took the photos of the great Aleppo Codex, which is very important for anybody who studies these Masoretic notes. So Ardom Bar Chama, here he is. He showed up. He had a flight back to Israel in the afternoon. I said, "You're never going to make it, my friend." But he finished up in less than 3 hours, got really fantastic photos. And here he is showing us the Tanakh. Here, I'll just show you one page of this is one of the photographs that he took. I'll introduce you to one more topic that we haven't yet seen. Here we see the word Kesia, one word, the throne of God. And he writes on the side, the scribe Yisrael Sofer says, Plukta, it's a disagreement. Kesia milachada. Is it one word, the word Kesia? Uvemuga, and in the Muga Codex, Kesia Trei Milin. It is actually 2 words, Kesia. And if you actually look in the Leningrad Codex, which we talked about earlier with Esther, you see it's actually 2 words, Kesia. So this Muga is another lost important Tanakh. It's the oldest quoted Tanakh that we know of. And it basically means corrected, that it was corrected to be correct. And so this now, our manuscript is telling us about the Hilleli Codex. It's also telling us about the Muga Codex. For time, I'll skip this for now. And I see with the time, what I want to do now is just do quickly. There was a whole nother set of notes. What was that, right? There's a whole nother set of notes, the red and the black notes. So just one more time to go over, we had the purple notes on one side of the pencil line, and we had the red and black notes on the other. And so I made up a whole recipe list, ingredients list for what I thought that manuscript would look like. Like it had to be 500 folios long. It had to be complete. It follows an unusual order for the Ketuvim, the writings, all these things, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it on Ketiv. And everyone I talked to says, speak to Ofer, just speak to Ofer. So I went to Ofer from Bar Ilan, who does this. He looks at Masoretic manuscripts. And he told me that he once saw a Tanakh that ended on page 500 and it fulfilled all my criteria. And this Tanakh used to be known as the Merzbacher Tanakh. And today it is actually known as the Schottenstein Spanish Bible, where it is held in Columbus, Ohio, in the Schottenstein collection. Now, even though it's in a private collection in Ohio, you may have seen this Tanakh if you went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 2017 and saw an exhibit on Jerusalem. I didn't know this at the time that I would be looking for this, but this is my own photograph from 2017 of the temple implements. You have the other side of the temple implements. Here we have Ardom Bar Chama's beautiful photography, and we can see the whole thing. And what I just want to end with is on this manuscript is that it's coincidentally, I don't think Ginsburg would have known this at the beginning, but it teaches us a lot about those 2 lost manuscripts, the Hilleli and the Muga, which if these were found today, these would be on all of our shelves as like, oh yeah, the JPS with the Muga or the JPS with the Hilleli instead of the JPS with the Leningrad. So so what we have over here is a great list of Hilleli spellings, the largest of its kind on earth. And Ginsburg, of course, is going to include that. And then also we have over here, he's quoting the Muga. I'm not going to go into the details for time, but over here we see in the book of the Muga, it's written this way. So all of a sudden we have this one book, which I bought, is really just opened up a whole new world to me on many levels. It started with Ginsburg himself and what he was doing and just the project of the Masorah. It led to two codices, both in the private realm, in private hands. So the scholars have not been able to analyze these and to especially analyze what makes each one unique and what makes it different from all the other codices. And that is something that is exciting, which will now be, at least for this one, will become more public. And then these also teach us about two lost Tanakhs, the Hilleli and the Muga. And for me, the most important thing is that it's going to teach us about Yisrael HaSofar, that one scribe, who we now know three of his books. And can we put those three together and see what it looks like, see what we have? Now, I'll end with this. Why the notes? Why did Ginsburg take all these notes? Why did he write those pencil lines in? What was he doing? Like, who cares? He already published the first, all these books. Why does he care? So do you remember when I first had this gut feeling that it was Bayer, his enemy? Because Bayer was going to check him and show how wrong he was, right? It wasn't Bayer. Bayer died. It wasn't Bayer. But I think Ginsburg was doing the same thing. He was checking himself. He's saying, I just presented 60 manuscripts. Here's two more. Was I right? And it turns out that 90% of the Masoretic, 99% or 98 to 99% of the Masoretic material in MS Holcomb 2 is in his 4-volume Masorah. So what that means is 1% was not. And so I think he would be very pleased to say that the Masorah is really a great contribution, and it worked. And he really did a good job. So it's been 100+ years, but kol hakavod. Thank you for that work. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I'll just say, if you have any questions about this talk or the Biblical Hebrew program, please feel to reach me at davidmoster@gmail. And you can also reach Dr. Elisa Braun, who also helps with our Hebrew program, at sabraun@jtsa.edu.
David, thank you so much. This was amazing. This is a real great detective story for nerds like for nerds, and I think that's right. Like, provenance stories are always such fun, and this one, it's amazing how you didn't just get the book and we're like, this is a nice book, I've got this. You're like, no, I need to understand why those pencil lines are there. To that point, why someone would use a ruler, obviously, to make said pencil lines on 2,500 pages. That's bananas. Um, do you have any idea why Ginsburg's copy didn't end up in an archive? Do you
So if
understand
anyone here is from Cleveland, Cleveland is part of the story because it belonged to, on the front plate, it said it once belonged to Rabbi Arnold Cohen. I'm getting the first name wrong. It's Arnold or something Cohen. And so how he got it, I don't know. But I do know he was ordained at the seminary in like the 1910s, and Ginsburg is that's his last decade of life. But I don't know how this book got to him.
that's the next level of the mystery you have to uncover here?
Right, Ginsburg left 6 copies of the Masorah to Cambridge. In every Cambridge library is almost scattered. It's all scattered. So there's 6 different copies that friends of mine are looking for as they go through their libraries who work there. So yeah, but I don't know how it got to Cleveland.
Oh, well, I'm excited for that, like, coda to this. We're getting so many people who are like, this is fascinating. People want to know what you're going to do with this. I know you're working on articles. Where do you want this published? How is this going to work? What are you thinking of using within the lens of JTS?
So short term, I'm about to put the actual volume 2 on my academia page so that it's just public. Anybody can have it if anybody's interested in looking at the notes. But long term, the owner of MS Holcomb 2 and I and Mordechai, who you had seen in the picture, we're discussing a potential idea of combining this scribe from Toledo's works that are 800 years old around the world, uniting them and somehow creating a Tanakh in his name. something like that. And part of that would also be to say, well, how is this Tanakh different from every other one? And any two scribes are different. There's no, so I have no doubt that there are differences. The only question would be finding them. So
I know we have to wrap up because I think you actually have a class to teach.
yeah,
So I'm gonna say there are tons of questions. If you guys, Dr. Moster was kind enough to share his email in the chat, so feel free. I'll send them to him as well, so he knows what's coming. But I also just want to thank you. This has been such a delight. And who knew? I'm sure your in-laws had no idea that they were sending you down this rabbit hole. But I'm so glad that they did. Thank you.
yeah. We'll see. Right, we'll see what happens this year. There's big pressure. So we'll see.
Yeah, and now people, of course, they're like, it's Armand Cohen, and he was born in
Yeah,
1909. He's the rabbi at Park Synagogue in
yeah, Park
Cleveland.
Synagogue. When Armand Cohen so the book says Armand Cohen, and it also says Park Synagogue Library. So I don't know if it's when he died, but it became part of the Park Synagogue Library. And then there was a bookseller in Cleveland that probably the library sold it to or donated. I'm not sure. But that's how it got into my hands.
Well, thank you, and I'm so glad it did. This was tremendously fun, and really really interesting. Um, for next time, we're going to be talking about writing in a different way. We're going to be talking about our new masters in fine arts, our MFA in creative writing, and you will be hearing from the director, who I'm telling you is a really exciting big name, but I can't announce it yet. So join us for that again on the 31st. We're having a Passover session with Rabbi Jan Urbach about a Talmudic story about the River Ganai. It's a really exciting, interesting story. We hope you can check it out. Also, make sure you can now the kind of magic of David Moster and teaching. And I hope that you will consider joining our program in Biblical Hebrew. We posted links in the chat throughout, but you can find it on the JTS website. And you'll be delighted to join a really phenomenal cohort of learners with really awesome teachers. Thanks, everyone.